All right, everybody. Good morning. Happy Monday. I hope you all had an incredible Valentine's Day weekend. It is freezing cold here in Connecticut. Oh my goodness. And so windy. You may even hear that wind howling during the demo today. So welcome back to my 20-day challenge. This is a February challenge that I'm doing for myself and for all of you. Every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, I'll be right here on my Facebook page with you painting away. Last week I did a painting from start to finish a little bit every day. So if you missed any of that, you can definitely go. They're on the Facebook page right now, and you can watch those there anytime. If you're here, let me know who's here and who's tuning in. Beautiful. Or if you're watching on replay, let me know who is here, who's watching on replay. Okay, so just a reminder, again, every week this week, I'm giving away one free copy of a DVD of my painting lessons. There are 5 really wonderful, beautiful painting lessons on this DVD. This is, a value of, $70. And you can still buy these on my website as well. I don't know if you can see that with the plastic cover on it, but this is a really wonderful prize. And so this is going to go, I'm giving away one of these a week to one member on my email list. You know you're on the email list if you get emails from me that say Art Life with Kelly. Okay, so I have 2 email lists. One is for collectors on kellyfolsom.com, and one is for artists and art students, and that's at artlifewithkelly, KELI.com. Art Life School members, obviously you're already included, you're already on the list. And so that's what I'm doing for February. If you don't know if you're on the list, check your inboxes. If you don't have an email in there from me, then go to artlifewithkelly.com. You can also get signed up if you're new to me, if you've just discovered me and my teaching and my work. You can also get signed up on that website for a free oil painting for beginners masterclass, which is so wonderful. It takes you from start to finish for beginners. And it also is in that masterclass absolutely for free. It's a $500 value that I give away absolutely for free. And even if feel like you're not a total beginner, but you want to brush up your skills, especially in regards to still life painting or oil painting, highly, highly recommend grabbing that. You can get that for free on my website. There is also a buildable step-by-step kind of sequential free course as well. And that one is called the 5-Day Still Life Painting Challenge. And that gets delivered to you over the course of 5 days. And you can build, on one small thing at a time. So that's also very, very good if you are a total beginner. And it's also great even if you're not a total beginner and you're just looking to brush up your skills or figure out what's kind of missing in your painting practice or in your skill set. So all of that you can get for free over at artlifewithkelly.com. Okay, so I'm not seeing any comments yet. Maybe everybody else is having as sleepy of a President's Day Monday as I am. Oh wait, there's some. Okay, sorry about that. Good morning. Ooh, nice. Baking and watching. Okay. Cindy says it's even cold here in Florida, 46 when I woke up. Yes, my parents are down at their, they have a little winter snowbird home down in South Texas on the Gulf there. And they said the same thing, Cindy. It's about the same temperature there for them as well. So my dad said he was getting in the hot tub today. Consuelo, good morning. Happy painting. I did a sound check, so you should be getting sound. So just double check that your sound is turned on. All right. Okay. Good morning, Consuelo, and thank you so much. I got another very, very lovely gift from you in the mail yesterday. They are so beautiful, such beautiful cards. Thank you so much for that. I did not have time to post a reference photo for today, and just so you know, I won't do that every day. So this one I think you'll be able to see pretty good on camera, and I can post one afterwards if I remember. Okay, so no, you won't have that one. This one, I'm just going back to do some little ones today. I'm going to be working on a 6x8. All right, Liberty says she's baking and watching. Awesome, awesome. Keep in mind too, these are also just paintings for me to get back in the saddle, get inspired, and I'm sharing with all of you, my thoughts along the way. So you definitely can benefit from watching these. And it's not like these are like a real workshop, okay? All right. Good, good, good. Good morning, Candy. For those of you who are interested in real classes, real workshops with me, outside of these free ones on Facebook, then you can sign up as an Art Life School member. We will have our next live workshop in March. Those always happen the first Thursday and Friday in March. Okay, so I'll just get a little bit closer here. Good morning, Dinah, so that you can see the palette and the still life setup. I just decided to go back and do something simple and faster today after last week's working on, the same painting all week, which was actually really nice. I very much enjoyed that. I didn't expect to work on it, every day initially, Monday through Friday, but I really enjoyed taking my time with it. It felt so good just to kind of be present with the painting and just, allow it to take as much time as it needed to take within reason. But I hope that that was helpful for all of you. It's like showing you how with just maybe an hour a day, you could perhaps do something a little bit bigger, maybe, or something more, maybe even something more complicated, and kind of break it down a little piece at a time, a little bite at a time, day by day. I think that's also very helpful if you are, if you're struggling with procrastination or avoidance, and you want to do something that you feel like is a higher quality, but you don't feel like you have, 6 hours, 8 hours, in a day to invest in that painting. Okay, let's get all set up here. So this week I'm going back and I'm going back smaller. Like I said, this is a 6x8 panel today. And I think this week, other than Wednesday, because I'll be in New York City on Wednesday, but I think this week I'm mostly going to be doing some smaller studies like this. This is something that I have done consistently throughout my career. I've done it, to just keep getting in the brush mileage, to make sure, for various reasons you could do these small ones or minis, for various different reasons. Sometimes for me they have served as studies for larger paintings. Trying to come up with some interesting compositions for larger works. Let's see, so. And then sometimes they've been just playful for me, like, oh, it just gives me a chance just to not take something quite as seriously and just kind of push some paint around and play around with different subjects, different ideas. But mostly I would say it's really good for mastery. So, this is something I've done consistently over the last 15 years is, scrape all this paint off, is daily paintings. For a long time, I did daily paintings. almost every single day for a number of years. And it was just part of my practice. Oopsie daisy. There went that. It was just part of my practice to reach mastery. So I think that is something important to mention, is that mastery does require a lot of repetition. And sometimes that repetition can feel a little redundant, or I think sometimes too, people can just get really bored with it, and I've even had, students in the past that have been like, oh, I just feel like it's always the same thing, or whatever, whether that's working on their mindset. Like I've even gotten emails or comments from people saying, oh, it just seems so repetitive, and it's like, well, there's a reason for that. So mastery does require a large amount of repetition, actually. Getting in your reps, getting in your consistency, your consistent repetitions. So a lot of people won't maybe reach that because they just won't sustain that for whatever reason. Now, obviously, you want to find ways to where, you can make it not as perhaps as boring for yourself, and maybe shake it up. There's so many ways you can do that. We are creative people. Artists are very creative. But I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding that being creative means new and novel all the time. Anyways, so just food for thought. If you feel like you're struggling to, like, oh, I'm bored, I don't want to paint. I'm always painting the same thing. See if you can switch your mindset, switch your perspective to find, see if you can find something else. Like what else could I focus on today, perhaps? How can I make this more exciting for myself today? In the beginning, whenever you're learning something new, like right now, I'm kind of playing around, learning some pottery and stuff. And in the beginning, all of the wins feel really huge. So even just trying to get the clay to stick to the wheel, or get the clay centered on the pottery wheel, took so much effort and concentration for me to do last week. And once I was able to do it, however imperfectly, I was also, so excited and delighted, and it felt like a huge accomplishment. So sometimes when something is new, you feel like you're growing faster. It might feel harder. So some people won't make it through the stage of it being really hard in the beginning, where everything just feels difficult and feels hard. But then after you're out of those really big leaps stage in the beginning, where you're, once you do get a handle on something, whether it's in painting, it would be color mixing, or just handling the paint, just feeling like, oh, I made an orange look like an orange today, or at least it doesn't look like an apple, or at least it has, some amount of form or something. But after you get past that kind of beginning stage, then I think the challenge comes in the plateau stage. And a lot of people can really just kind of lose their momentum in the plateau stage, because when you're plateauing, the growth is slower. The return on investment feels a lot slower. And so a lot of times people will stop painting during that stage, or they'll totally like switch to a whole different style, or, they'll get bored. They'll switch to a whole different style, a whole different subject matter. They'll start jumping around a lot, thinking that that's the problem. And really, it's just a matter of like patience and dedication. And I'm not saying, not to, mix it up a little bit. Again, you want to balance, you don't want to feel like every time you go to the easel, you're dealing with drudgery, But again, there's so many ways that you can find different things to focus on or experiment with, even if you are painting, let's say, still life. In my case, it was painting still life day after day after day. But because I painted it day after day after day is how, I built mastery in that. So one day I might be focusing on composition more. One day I might be focusing more on just brushwork. One day, maybe how can I create stronger form in my painting? So finding ways to challenge yourself in the learning process and keep it fresh for yourself, I think is key. And then obviously, getting support in that as well, signing up for a class or with an instructor, maybe going and taking a workshop every now and then to refresh, get your juices flowing again, or kind of give yourself a boost, if you are in that plateau. The worst thing you can do is to just kind of go, just totally drop it, So there's also ways that you can do that. Maybe you need to kind of shake it up if you're feeling like you're in a plateau by, signing up for a class, whether that's online or in person, or doing a workshop or something. All right, this was a painting that got washed off. This is dry, this tone. It's not really any particular color, so don't ask me what it is because it's just a wash off painting. That didn't get finished. For me, if I know I'm not going to finish something, or if a painting really went south, or just at this stage for me, a lot of them don't really go south, but they are just incomplete, and I know don't have enough interest to go back. I would rather just wash it off and save the panel and reuse the panel. So that's what this tone is, and it is dry, just so you know, which is a little bit different than what I normally do. And I'm just going to start the painting with a little bit of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And the other nice thing about repetition and familiarity is that, you get a certain level of stability with that, so that, I would be careful not to knock it because, there's a certain amount of familiarity that comes from repetition. So if you've painted, these amber bottles, a bunch of times, which is in my case, this is a subject that I've painted a lot in my career. Just these simple, dark, amber antique bottles and, some eucalyptus and an orange. There's nothing, too exciting going on here, shall we say. It's a very, very simple subject matter, very, very simple still life. And the beauty of that is that, there's a certain level of comfort and stability and familiarity with that, which opens you up. If you feel stable enough, it actually can kind of open you up to exploring more in other ways. So does that make sense? Where you don't have to feel like it's all a struggle the whole time. You have a pretty solid understanding of how to, make an orange look like an orange, or a dark bottle look like a dark bottle. So because of that, what the beautiful thing that can happen is that you can start to focus on other things to play with in the painting. You're not solving just the most basic problems of how to make that thing look like that thing. So it really is a gift to, kind of revisit similar subjects throughout your painting practice for that reason. So I'm just going to have these. And I also know, for example, that this color combination pretty much always works, this kind of sagey green with orange. And there's nothing wrong with that. so it allows you to kind of set a lot of the problems are solved, and it allows you to be able to explore other things like maybe, conceptual ideas, or paint quality, or, okay, what if I really, push the reflected lights more, or, maybe even just like, how can I play around with detail versus simplicity in this painting? What can I discover there? So it just kind of opens you up to potential to get more creative when you feel more stable. So stability doesn't have to equal, just boring, repeating yourself. It can actually equal creativity because you feel stable enough to kind of innovate and find other ways to innovate beyond the subject matter. Does that make sense? Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Trish and Mary and Maria and Kathy Kepler from Ohio. Good morning, Marie Pula from California, Kathy Michaels, JP from Connecticut. Good morning. Bonjour. Okay. So just starting with this simple size and placement. I love this kind of arch of the eucalyptus leaves sort of arching over the open orange slice, and then I have, kind of one final little eucalyptus leaf here that should curve us back around. So it's almost kind of like a circular composition. All right, I'm going to make this bottle in front a little bit darker with some ivory black and burnt umber, a little bit of alizarin crimson, just because we have two dark amber bottles stacked one on top of each other. So just to see a little more contrast, this one in front is a little bit darker in value. The one in back is a Clorox, an antique like Clorox bottle, which is really cool. I've had both of these in my still life stash for a number of years. And when it comes to, collecting your still life objects, sometimes you just have to take chances on stuff because you don't know, you don't really know how paintable it is. I would say, one piece of advice I have for that is keep it simple. Sometimes keep it simple and kind of feelings at least somewhat universal. Sometimes the more complicated it becomes, the harder those things are to paint. Like, I've seen people really struggle to try to create a still life painting with like what's it called? There was a type of pottery. Is it raku? I don't know. I've seen some people try to paint like some Art Nouveau type of pottery pieces that are very elaborate, or maybe even something else that's even more specific than that. And sometimes pieces like that can just be kind of very challenging to paint, not universal enough. So try to hunt for universal objects, I would say, and get a variety of dark objects, white objects, simple objects like these, and also objects that have pattern on them. Okay, so I'm going for my background color with some ultramarine blue, some yellow ochre, a little bit. You can put in a little bit of that burnt umber on the shadow side so it stays a little bit darker and warmer. And I use more medium in this initial layer. And that basically the color it looks like now, it's going to dry a little bit darker than what it looks now because there is more medium in the paint. And at this stage, the paint is all very, very wet and kind of slippery. So you just kind of have to let the paint kind of slip and slide around a bit. So I wouldn't get too attached to my drawing necessarily at this stage. knowing that as I'm, painting in this kind of color, that, some of these maybe edges and contours are going to get painted over. Maybe the initial contour I put in might get messed up a bit, and that's okay. So, and I would prefer not to have an outline around my objects at this stage. So be careful, kind of drawing in like a perfect outline of things and then trying to hold on to that drawing outline whenever you're painting, because number one, you can end up with this outlined look on your objects, which doesn't really lead to a very atmospheric design. It tends to flatten. I'm just going to push my light box back a little bit because I don't really want that cast shadow on the back wall. So just be careful of that, is what I would say. That's another kind of big pitfall I think I've seen a lot of artists that I've taught over the years and workshops and whatnot fall into. I'm going to go a little bit lighter with some more yellow ochre and Naples yellow. You can still have some more medium back here. I'm not going to do like a hard edge cast shadow back here today. I'm just kind of blending a little bit of this in wet into wet. So I know that the most contrast I want to have here is on the right hand side of this bottle. So I'll start the paint thicker there, and then I'll let it kind of spill out and blend in. And it kind of goes back a little bit darker on this side, which I think is nice because it kind of pops the light. So you don't have to do, a sharp cast shadow all the time on the shadow side. You can have it be, kind of a fade from dark to light. Good morning, Eva. Good morning, Barbara Schatz. Good morning, Lynn Gatling. Coffee. Yes. I know. Monday mornings can be challenging, can't they? Especially after I had such a nice, relaxing weekend. So calming. And it was freezing cold here in Connecticut with lots of snow and ice. So just kind of staying inside and staying bundled up. So it's a slow re-entry to the week for me, just taking my time to get back into the groove of things. So I can start to turn these bottles into bottles right away, glass bottles, by just getting some of the highlights on. It kind of automatically starts making them look glass-like. And these are pretty simple objects to paint. Not everything in your painting has to be complicated. It's a good idea to try to have some things in the painting that are easier and simpler. I should say simpler, because sometimes we think things are going to be easy and then we start painting it and we're like, whoa, that was harder than I thought it was going to be. I'm just doing kind of a thinner, almost like a glaze in a way, just kind of a thinner wash of burnt umber and some burnt sienna for the tabletop flame for now. I'm kind of doing mine as a tabletop composition where I'm looking down on the subject a bit. And so one of the things that's different about those kind of compositions is you're typically moving the eye front to back or back to front, versus last week's painting was moving the eye with the eye level perspective. It's more about moving the eye left to right or right to left or up to down And so with this kind of eye level, you usually want to stack your objects, even if it's just a few objects, from front to back. And, you know, maybe have some more empty space in the front than you would in a eye level still life. All right, so I'm going to get started with the orange color. I'm going to start with, if you have Cad Orange, you could use that as well. I'm using Cad Red Light and Cad Yellow Deep. That basically gets me Cad Orange. And I would always really love playing with these cut open oranges. And it took me so many years just to feel comfortable painting something like that because, again, it felt more complex to me. Now I'm going to make a darker shadow version for the peel with some burnt umber, burnt sienna, Cad Red Deep. You're just making kind of two sort of flat shapes. One flat shape for the local color in the light, and one for the color and value of the shadow. Without highlight, and then also that rind kind of goes back and around the back edge. Just a tiny sliver of it. Just getting a little bit of glare there, so I'm going to tilt that down. And then I'm going to start on the orange color, the cut part. That's going to have kind of a lot of light in it. I'm going to start with a little bit of the orange color that's showing through underneath first, and then build that, you know, really light color on top. So this will have some white paint in it, even the kind of glowier part. And if you pick up some of that background color or the burnt umber, that's actually a good thing, because usually with these luminescent, kind of luminous, translucent type of objects, you always have a little bit of this kind of grayish tone that is in the mix. The color over here is actually quite similar to the color of the shadow on the rind. I want to be careful that I don't overcomplicate that. I think what makes that look like cut orange versus rind shadow is how, you know, we're getting some of the glow of the light moving through it, and we're getting some of that kind of membrane, that white stuff going into shadow there as well. So, but otherwise, if I ignore those things, they're actually kind of the same. It's actually all kind of the same color and value. So I'm just going to unify this for now, just to keep it simple. And then this doesn't really have a highlight, I would say. Okay, on the skin, because where the highlight would be is where the cut open part of the rind is. So I'm going to start to put in some of this light where the cut open part of the rind is, with some white and some Naples yellow, and just start to build some of that impasto on top of the wet paint underneath. And back here where the kind of circling around where that rind is on the back corner. Trying to kind of curve where some of these wedges, these wedge-like shapes are. And if you accidentally go kind of put those in too thick, that's okay. Come back in with your yellow-orange color and kind of carve them down a bit more. You can also reach for a smaller brush if that's helpful to you. Let's see. There's a little bit of that orange showing through on this side, but on the left side, there's more of that kind of white type of stuff going on. So that'll be, the start of that. It's not necessarily the finish. There is on the inside of the navel, on the right-hand side of the navel, do you see that little pocket of light there? It's like there's a little bowl, little concavity, little hole here in the center. And again, it's like, ooh, so challenging to do that. I'm using a 0 and it's still hard to, get just that tiny little shape in there. But that's where the hole is in the center. So I do want to try to bring that out if I can, because it's kind of an interesting bit of detail. So you do want enough detail here to balance a lot of the simpler, quieter stuff in the painting. So I'm going to use some of my orange color, some cad yellow deep, maybe some burnt sienna as well for reflected light on this dark bottle here. And I'd like to build that a little bit softer, a little softly at a time. I try not to go as impasto on my brushstrokes for reflected light here, making sure that the surface light still maintains, its dominance. And again, keeping in mind, like the thinner this paint goes down in here, the more it's going to kind of meld with that color underneath. And maybe for the little bit of yellow ochre for the reflection of the Naples yellow there. Now this is where I can start to go back in and make sure that all of my contour edges are strong and sharp where they need to be. So mixing back up that dark bottle color with the ivory black, alizarin crimson, some burnt sienna, and making sure that this curve here on the top of the bottle is nice and strong, matches the other side, but that really needs to feel like it's overlapping in front of the background. Good morning, Rachel. Good morning, Pam Ingle. Ooh, fun. Sleepover party with the two grandkids. Fun, fun, fun. Don't be afraid to use, I would say, solid paint here in your darks, especially if it's a really rich dark, really rich color. If you use too thin of paint, it'll just look a little duller in color. So that initial paint that I put down is just the start, right? And then I'm going to turn my brush to the side to get the little lip on here. Good morning, everybody. Hope you are getting ready to create this week, make some beauty, contribute some beauty to the world, which we so need right now, and you need. We all need that in our lives, and we need that creativity in our life. It's interesting. I'm reading so many books right now and listening to audiobooks that this theme just keeps coming up, all these scientific, studies and everything about how much creativity, just even cures anxiety for people. It's really very, very interesting. And I'm not even purposefully seeking these books out to be similar or on that topic, but it's just interesting how many books I've been been being drawn to and reading that, are all touching on this topic. So I find that to be fascinating because for a long time, especially if we're raised in a world that in a society that kind of conditions us to think that art making maybe is a little frivolous or isn't really that valuable or useful. So for me, it's just really beneficial to see now that no, actually it is. It's actually a necessity for our well-being to create as human beings. So I'm using more burnt sienna there to get the color of the branch showing through the glass. And that's not transmitted light, it's just the branch, the light value of the branch showing through the glass. That's always the fun part about painting glass is even on a dark glass like this, you can typically see whatever is inside. So you don't necessarily need a ton of still life objects that have, a ton of fancy bells and whistles going on. You could just paint some simple things like this, but observe it, really closely, really look. Don't just assume that we know that what it looks like. If we really take the time to observe and take it in, it's like, oh, that object is actually much more interesting than I thought it was. Painting still life can actually be a very intimate experience, and teach us to kind of slow down and really take it in and really look and kind of be in the present moment. So I'm just using some burnt umber there to kind of deepen my form shadow. I'm going to pull in some more black for cast shadow underneath. And painting slower or faster does not necessarily mean that you are more or less observant. I think that's another misconception. It's like somebody who paints slow can just not be really focused and observing either. So it's not about the speed in which you create. It's about the quality of your focus. Are you really looking? Are you really taking it in and looking for the things that make that object, give that object sort of its essence, its character? Just filling in a little bit of that white there. I like not having a totally polished background or foreground and just kind of adding a little bit at a time as I see as needed. Even little things like, this kind of tapers in a bit more, the contour of that orange. That's the beauty of really taking your time to observe. All right, there's always a little bit of surface light on glass. I'm going to do a little bit more blue and alizarin crimson, and with that kind of background green. This one kind of has like a purpley gray type of color. A little bit of dusting on the top plane here to bring out more of the plane changes on this object where the neck meets the shoulders. Anytime you have a vase, something like that, you're going to have that connection where it's like the two parts are connected right here. And so you want to show the separation of those two parts. I could make my highlight maybe a little bolder here. This bottle in front is going to stand out a bit more than the bottle back behind. Eventually, I'm going to use a little bit of my Naples yellow. I think that's going to tie in nicely with the yellow that's on the orange. Okay. Let's start to build some of my eucalyptus color. with some ultramarine blue, some Naples yellow, some lemon yellow, just to give it a little extra bite. And this leaf is pretty large. I think I'm going to make it a bit smaller just in my painting. I'm going to put a little more bite of that lemon yellow in there. It's just to kind of connect the color a bit more with the orange. And then to wipe that, I'm going to wipe that white out of my brush and go in for some shadow, where that leaf is folded up. In front, it's kind of curved and folded up. So I'm doing some ivory black and cad yellow deep. This isn't cast shadow on the tabletop plane. It's actually the shadow of the leaf itself. And then for shadow on the tabletop plane, I'll take it all the way dark, total absence of light. And since we're doing a darker tabletop plane, that'll be some black and alizarin crimson, very similar to the amber, dark amber color. But you always want to make sure that everything is anchored down with some cast shadow. So if you were maybe raised at all like me, similar at all to the conditioning I was raised with, it might take you a long time to even feel like this much investment in your art is even, worth anything. So, it took me a long time to really get to this place and really know and understand that, my the investment in my mastery, the investment, in my creativity, nurturing that, investing in that, both with my time and my energy and financially, that it was worth it. But it took a lot of overcoming some self-doubt, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of conditioning, kind of programming. We didn't have art classes in school, things like that. And kids take that in, They're like, oh, nobody else is doing this, and it's not a class in school, so it must not be that important. All right, I'm going to go back to my eucalyptus color, begin to build some of these eucalyptus leaves. And even if you're not going to do it as, totally, let's say like me, where it becomes your livelihood, or you want it to be your livelihood, even if you're not pursuing it in that way, it's still incredibly valuable. It's a valuable skill. And it's also, just being on that right side of the brain, like I said, kind of coming out of the left side of the brain, which is all about logic, which at least here in the United States, that's really what seems to be valued more than anything is, that left hemisphere of the brain, the logic side of the brain over the creative side. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to have some of these kind of going off the canvas or not. I might play around with that. We'll see. So those of you who, maybe you're now a grandmother, I just noticed Pam mentioning that, so them watching you do your art, invest, time and energy into your art making, you're sending that grandkid or that child a message that this is important. It matters. All right. I'm going to mix up some shadow color for the eucalyptus leaves with some ivory black, some cad yellow deep. Not every kid is going to be good at sports. Not every kid maybe is even going to be, a math whiz. Some kids are creative and that's their gift and their skill set. So I think it's really a beautiful thing for grandfathers, grandmothers, mothers, fathers to illustrate that to their kids. That this matters too. It's not all just about sports or even just about, academic, memorizing of things and getting A's. I mean, that's kind of the challenging thing too. I think I was always a hyperachiever in school. That gave me a lot of confidence, or a lot of, I got a lot of praise for that, I guess I'll say. And that felt good, to be good in school, to be good in math, to be good in, English or reading or, all that stuff. But with art, it's like there's really no grades for art. And it can be challenging to break out of that mindset and that way of thinking, especially if that's how you're seeing other people being rewarded in life is through this this kind of achievement grade type of mindset. So how do you judge art? And I'm thinking about this because Monty and I, on Valentine's Day, we drove back up to where I attended art school. And so we were kind of talking and reminiscing about so many challenges that we both faced in art school. And how quickly it became clear that it was more about, did that teacher in particular, like your kind of art, like your style of art. It wasn't really based on merit, so it was very different than just kind of the classic, way that we're raised in public school or even in private school for me. Like there's really, how do you even give a grade for art? So you kind of have to also let go a little bit of that. I mean, obviously there's awards, there's things like that, but once you get into the art world, you also kind of start to discover, well, a lot of those things are so subjective. Even the awards or getting accepted into an art show, a lot of those things, it's not, it's not like a check things off the list kind of situation. I guess I would say. Anyways. All right, maybe I don't want that light right there on the end of the surface. All right, so getting in some of these cast shadows, if this leaf is on top of the other eucalyptus leaf on bottom, it's going to be casting a shadow there. And then all leaves, you want to have sharper edge on the outside, softer edges on the inside. So I'm just kind of cleaning up my edges there just to make sure that that's nice and crisp on the front edge versus the interior edge. I'm going to leave that one out, maybe. Okay. And you could apply the paint like me, where, you're kind of almost like, kind of feels to me almost like building it like it's modeling wet clay. Or you can apply the paint differently. There's not a good or bad, right or wrong, just as long as you get the look that you're after, right? So you might apply paint, in bolder brush strokes. That's just a difference in brush handling. how one artist handles the paint or makes brushstrokes in comparison to another artist. You can make small brushstrokes, you can make big brushstrokes. All of that is just depends, artist to artist, what speaks to you, how you like to manipulate the paint. So I'm just going to start building in some more solid color here on this jar, this bottle that's back behind with more burnt sienna. Just kind of building up more of that orangey tone. Got lots of wet paint down to work with here. This one has more of kind of the orangey color that's in the orange, less of the dark brown. So I'm just kind of getting in some of that golden, glowy color that I'm seeing in there. I'm not going to do as much on the reflected light on that one. It's further back in space, and I want to make sure to get back up to the orange that's in front. Do want to make sure this whole left edge, or majority of the left edge, feels darker and in shadow. Kind of got this nice diagonal movement going on here. So I can also kind of play that up by, maybe building a little more light on the inside of this eucalyptus stem, or, just making a little bit more of the stem there. It's a good idea at this stage, as you're kind of in the final stages of the painting, just to sometimes take a break, stand back, see what needs completing to finish the painting, especially if you're trying to finish that painting that day or in one sitting. I'm going to go horizontal strokes here to get these reflected lights in here. And then usually need to kind of quiet down some of the background a bit, and also maybe look for some value variations in the background. I'll start first just by maybe kind of smoothing out some of that background, minimizing some of the brushwork. That will automatically kind of push that background back in space. If you want to go really kind of more drama, chiaroscuro lighting, you would take that background even darker. If you want to keep it more kind of middle tone background, then this value, would be good. If you want to play up more glow from the orange, then you probably need to I would probably need to take my background darker. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Like halation, really only makes sense if it's against, a much darker background. So trying to do like a halation on this lighter green background is not really going to have the same impact it would have, say, last week on that, much darker background painting. Okay, so that does make a big difference. You can't, especially the value of this background back here, as you can see, you can try to put it in, but it doesn't work. So sometimes students will say like, oh, how do you get that, that halo, that halation? But one of the problems they might be facing is that their background color is the background value is the same value as the object that's, kind of casting the glow. Okay, so glow happens whenever you have a really light, bright object against a really darker object in the background. So if you're struggling to kind of get that You can still get, kind of a soft atmospheric look like this, but it's not going to have that same kind of dramatic glowy effect. So if you've been struggling with that at all, just know that that's really kind of a value problem. And again, you have to decide what the look is that you want to have in your painting. So if you were painting this painting and you really wanted to have that dramatic, glowy look, you would have to go darker in the background. I always like to float a little bit of background color onto my tabletop shadows. I'm also thinking that color is going to work as the white membrane in shadow. So it's just kind of like a grayer tone in shadow. And I want to come back to this orange and do some more work on that. Make sure I get enough detail on that and enough kind of light as well. I think the light on that could really be punched up. So to illustrate the value situation I was just talking about as well, you could see how, for example, like if I darken this tabletop around these reflected lights, that's going to emphasize the reflected lights more. It's going to make the reflected light stand out more. Okay, so for those lighting effects, you have to have the right kind of values set up to create that look. Does that make sense? I hope you can see that difference that happens just by, I'm putting back in some burnt umber, some alizarin crimson. So, for example, it would be happening more here by the orange. And so sometimes your still life stand may not be, as dark and rich as what you would like. But this is, if you know what works in paint, you don't have to always have it there in real life. You know how to create that look or that effect in oil paint or in acrylic or whatever you're working in. Most likely for this kind of painting, dark to light, you're working in acrylic or oils. So you have to have enough value contrast to make that work. And it has to be kind of a bold enough light value or a bold enough color, bright color, to for that to work as well. Because this eucalyptus stem is folded up, like this side is in shadow, it's stopping the light. The stem is actually cupping the light. So like this eucalyptus, the way that it's positioned, it just wouldn't be giving off a lot of reflected light in that case. Okay, so you can play with that. Those are things you can kind of play around with in this painting. And if, again, kind of the benefit and beauty of painting similar subjects long enough that you get familiar enough with them that you're not just struggling to make the thing look like the thing, so you get to kind of focus on other topics, I guess I should say, in the painting. Thank you, Trish. So glad you are enjoying it. Yay. Thank you so much. Just going to push some straight up Naples yellow here. Just pure Naples yellow. I don't have to overcomplicate the color mixture if it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. But I'm just trying to build up some more texture, more crisp edges here. See if I can get more of the curve the orange. Now, the more light I build up on this, the more potential there is for that halation effect. So if you want your, if you want to push your reflected lights, things like that, you have to push your lights lighter. A little bit of that, a little more light here on the top part of this rind. Just kind of adding a little more of the cad lemon in there to try to get more curve on this orange. So the orange begins to, the sphere of the orange starts to curve under right about here. Just trying to make sure I have enough value gradation there. Oh, that wind is howling out there. So you could really, have fun doing all of these little details. Going to the Louvre and the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. So often is like so enjoyable just to see how much sometimes they would put into a single orange. Need a little more green there on the turn into shadow. You also want to make sure that you're getting enough inspiration from, perhaps art history or going to galleries or museums. Definitely you want to go look at paintings in person if at all possible. Printing never, digital and printing hardly ever catches the real deal, So trying to go and look at things in person, I highly recommend. Now, if you want an orange to feel more lighted, move more towards the lighter. Move away from orange local color and move more towards yellow orange, I would say, and kind of keep more of the red orange in the halftone area. But there's no substitute for seeing artwork in person. I would say you can really see like the brushwork. There's so much more that you can see in reality in real life that you can't see in a photo of the artwork. Even in a really good digital photo. Also, sometimes they're really changing a lot of the painting. I've noticed that sometimes they're doctoring up the image. They're maybe heightening the contrast. Even on these really old paintings, like I noticed that with Chardin's paintings that are in the Louvre, that they're actually quite darker in real life. A lot of his paintings look a little bit better in the photos online because they're increasing the color contrast. And either way, they're still beautiful paintings, but I would say especially for nuances and details like color nuances or brushwork nuances, you really need to study, the paintings in person, if at all possible. I know it's not always easy to find a museum or always get to a museum, but it's important. And you'll walk away having learned so much and feel so inspired, so it's really, really worth it. Just kind of livens up your artistic practice. All right. So I think, let's see, I kind of lost my greenish rind color here in the shadow. Try to bring that back. And my greenish gray, a little too bright, so I'll come back over it with a little gray. And let's see, I think that cad red is a little too opaque of a color for the glow coming through the orange. So I'm going to try alizarin crimson, which is transparent, with the cad yellow deep. Let's see if that gets a better kind of glowier red on the inside. I think that's nice because it was just feeling a little too opaque, too bricky to be in shadow. You do want your shadows to be feel a little more translucent, even if it's not totally transparent pigments or totally transparent paint. You do want the shadow to feel a little more translucent than the light. I'm just feeling like this whole form shadow, I could just take it darker, I could simplify it, take color out. There's so much detail in this one little orange that, I think having a little bit of balance there, sometimes too, you kind of get the same, I got the same value here on tabletop plane to cast shadow and form shadow. So sometimes you can just pull away some of the paint to reveal some of the tone that's underneath, and it'll look more lighted, bring in more of that value contrast that you need to show bottom of the object to tabletop, but without pulling in a bunch of light value or a bunch of opaque paint. So you can definitely utilize your ground to also create the illusion of reflected lights, very, subtle reflected lights. You don't always have to be applying paint all the time. You can actually kind of remove and lift paint sometimes to get a look. But, see, that's one of those things that you might not discover if you're always like trying to paint something that's so challenging to you all the time. So it's another, I think, just I'm advocating, I guess what I'm advocating today is don't always maybe be trying to, oh, I've painted that before, especially if you're thinking, oh, people are going to be like, you always paint that. As soon as you start thinking about what other people are going to say, you've immediately given all your power away to other people's perceptions. And we all do it, but just know that that is just fear talking. And I've even had teachers and peers and stuff even criticize me in the years past of like, well, how many times have you painted that? A lot. I've painted that kind of subject a lot, and for good reason. So, be careful of that to people who don't know what they're talking about, or just kind of, inadvertently criticizing you or giving you, what is it called? Backhanded compliments. Don't feed into that. So anyway, so that's my point of view on it. That's what I'm advocating for today. This month, part of what I'm doing here for myself and for others is, just trying to share some of these lessons learned, both technical and, the mental and emotional side that goes into art making as well. So I'm advocating today for, painting something that is a bit in your comfort zone so that you can actually unearth and kind of create and discover more nuanced things to focus on. Does that make sense? I hope this is this resonating with anybody today? I hope it is. We all have that little inner judge, that little inner critic that comes out to kind of judge us, and we have enough of that on our own. So sometimes we give into those things that people say because we're already judging ourselves for that, or thinking that, or second guessing ourselves sometimes. Sometimes I like little mistakes that happen like that, like there's just some random brushstroke up there. So for whatever reason, I like the look of it, so I'm going to leave it. You can really use a knife also to just kind of smudge and smooth. If your knife is nice and flat and clean, and with that caveat that you have a good a good quality knife. I talked about that the other day too. And maybe I just want a little pocket of light there. It doesn't have to be a strong highlight. This is kind of dried out. This little orange is dried out a bit. You can also use a knife, painting wet into wet, if it feels like you're trying to put jelly on top of peanut butter with a brush. A brush is going to have, even a hog hair brush is going to have a softer application. So if you really want to get something to stick on top of wet paint, without, walking away and maybe waiting like last week, break out the knife, and it's going to give you a cleaner look of light, more powerful look of light, because it's got stronger edge contrast. All right, everybody. Yay, the hunt for the red amber bottles. Yeah, you can find these, Pam. I find these all the time at antique stores. I have more luck at antique stores, I think, than thrift shops, but you can, peruse the Goodwills and the thrift stores as well. Sometimes you can find stuff like this, but a lot of these antique, both for the cobalt and the amber, dark amber bottles, I tend to find most of those at actual antique stores. And you can, get them pretty affordably. I think, it's not like it's that uncommon of an object to find. So you should be able to find one at an antique store somewhere for, I'd say, around $10. I think this bigger Clorox one cost me about $15. So I think, depends on where you go. All right, everybody. Good. I hope this was helpful. I'm just going to kind of carve my name in, not too close to the edge. So if I frame this, it won't cut off my signature. I'm going to soften this edge on the inside. Remember, I said sharp edges on the outside, soft on the inside. On leaves or petals, that's good for both leaves and petals. All right. And I'll kind of zoom in here a little bit more. If you want to take a screenshot on your camera, on your PC or on your phone of the setup, you can take a screenshot of that if you want to paint from this today, and of my painting as well. I'll kind of do a separate zoom in on the painting where it's not at an angle. Let me see if I need to do this more. So there you go. You can take a screenshot of that if you want to paint from this today. Okay. And you can take a screenshot of the painting. I'm sure I'll get it photographed at some point, but I don't know if it'll be right away. So if you want to get started on this right away, I would recommend taking the screenshot. Okay. All right. All right, everybody. Again, reminder, if you're on the email list, you get a chance to win one of the DVDs. We're giving another one of those away this Friday. Let me just go through and make sure there's any questions. This is 6x8, Pam Engel. I did a little bit smaller today. And let's see. For years, I would do a daily still life painting first thing in the morning. Like as soon as I woke up, I'd get a cup of coffee, and I have a little still life that I maybe would set up the night before, something very, very simple. And I would do a little 5x7 or a little bit 6x8 every single morning in under an hour. And oh my gosh, I have to really advocate for that because it helped me build my skill set so much early on. Okay, just checking to see if there's any questions I missed. Yay, Marie, I'm so glad that this is helpful to you. Awesome. And Art Life School members, don't forget, you have your new lessons coming out on Friday. We have our March live workshop coming up. So stay tuned for announcement on the theme on that. That's always the first week of the month. So it'll be the first Thursday and Friday of March. Okay. I don't see any other questions here. Thank you all so much for being here. I hope this was valuable, helpful to you. You are so, so welcome. Mwah, and happy painting. Bye for now.